Welcome to Film Talk Weekly Radio. This is your guest host, Castle Cersei, with the Santa Fe International Film Festival. Today, we're here with Gregg Stouffer, producer, editor, professor. Greg, where are you right now?
I'm in Denver right now, but 2 years ago we were down in New Mexico. We spent 2 years. We moved there to do editing and take New Mexico by storm. But we moved there in January of 2020, and it was a beautiful place to wait out COVID. And so we loved it. We were down in Placitas and just had a great time in New Mexico.
So, do you know people from the Santa Fe Film Fest?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Santa Fe International Film Fest.
In fact, I even edited earlier versions of this podcast for Jacques. So
Oh, okay. So, you know the deal.
yes,
Yeah, you
yeah.
told me to say hi to Jacques the other day, so you can say hi yourself.
Hi, Jacques.
Hi, Jacques. What was it like being there in the pandemic? Was there editing work to do?
There was a little bit. Wait, that's when my wife Tammy is a director.
Who's also been on the show. We might interview you two together. We've been doing these couples in the industries.
It would be interesting because she's a director and I'm an editor, and it's I edited a feature film a feature documentary that she directed, and um, there's always a little bit of tension between director and editor, and when you stack on a marriage on top of that, and plus the COVID shut-in thing, it was interesting. So I spent most of the shutdown editing that um for her, and so she basically got free editing for a year and a half.
That's amazing. I was thinking it might be great to be married to an editor if you're a filmmaker.
Yeah, we met another couple at a festival, and she's a documentary filmmaker, but her husband was the cinematographer, and she says, "I wish I'd be married to the editor because I would have saved a lot more money. The cinematographer's job is over in a couple of weeks, and the editor lives on for years." So
Well, you do so many things. I'm just gonna give like a teaser of what I know. You work for the Pickleball Channel. You just finished editing the Olympics. We're gonna get deep into these later.
okay,
Um, what else? You teach at CU Denver?
yes,
Okay, what do you teach?
I teach this semester. I'm teaching editing and sound design, which is
Cool.
which is a lot of fun.
Okay, and what else? What else are you currently working on? Are those three things?
Tammy always has a project in the hopper, so I'm kind of the in-house editor. So actually, we just talked about I'm going to start on a project for her tomorrow. Um, it's always interesting because there's as an editor, I have all of the equipment that I need to work. Here, I actually have two editing systems in this room. I can bounce back and forth. I taught a class in After Effects, and now I'm doing a lot of graphics and things like that. So right now, Tammy she's going after some grant money to finish something that she shot last November. And if she gets the funding for that, then we'll go forward. It is one of those things where I have to kind of set some boundaries with her. Otherwise, she will keep me editing pro bono for the rest of my life. But
Right.
I do love editing. I love storytelling and all its facets. And she always has interesting projects in the hopper. I'm not sure if I can even talk about them yet. So
She definitely does. I know um when I was speaking with her, it was about a long march.
mhm.
So that's done, right?
That one is done. So right now, Long March is actually on PBS. It's a 60-minute documentary. It's being nationally distributed by PBS. It's having a pretty good run in October because I believe it's geez, I'm gonna screw this up. Asian Pacific Heritage Month. Um, and so it'll get quite a run in October. The best thing to do is to check with your local PBS station, check their schedule, look for a long march. It's basically a feature documentary about Filipino World War II veterans and how the U.S. government has systematically been locking them out of benefits and recognition for 70 years now. And there's a bit of a ticking clock because most of the World War II veterans, as we know, are dying off and
Right.
they're reaching their 90s and hundreds and it's so there's that. And then we also Tammy also directed an episode for American Masters for PBS. And we're going actually out to Washington, D.C. for a world premiere at the Kennedy Center in DC,
Cool.
and then they're showing it again in New York City, uh,
Okay.
and that's all next week. So we're launching that. So keep an eye on out for a long march on PBS and an American Masters version or episode of Renegades about uh, Senator Daniel Inouye from Hawaii. So
Okay.
Renegades is a series about uh, historical figures who were disabled. Um, and
Interesting.
the interesting thing is Daniel Inouye lost an arm in World War II, but he would be the first person to tell you that he was not disabled. So it was kind of an interesting to do a story that someone who really did not consider themselves disabled, but that was the nature of the series. So but Tammy did an amazing job with that episode, and so she has two things going on PBS this month. Check your
Great.
local listings.
Okay. Thank you. And did you edit both of these?
I actually did not do the American. I did a long march. The other thing I did actually while I was down in New Mexico, I edited remotely an episode of for Food Network that was nominated for a daytime Emmy
Oh,
for ed.
wow. Do you have an Emmy?
It was nominated.
Okay. Okay.
But I have won two Emmys over the years, but that one it was actually kind of crushing because I really deserved it. But we ended up losing to a Netflix show, which I kind of got upset about because they don't even have day parts. So how do you how do you lose a daytime Emmy to Netflix? But
Right. Netflix is like 24/7.
yes, I'm not bitter.
What was the Netflix show?
So it was a Food Network show starring Giada De
Hmm.
Laurentiis. It was Giada at home. It was really interesting. And the reason we were nominated for an Emmy was it was very early during COVID. It was like 2 months into the shutdown. And so she shot an entire episodes using iPhones with no crew. It was her boyfriend and her daughter,
Wow.
all of the filming. And we set up, iPhones all around. So the entire series or the entire show, I think we did 6 episodes, was on shot on iPhones.
It can be done.
It can be done, and it
And you can
actually
get an
looks
Emmy
great.
for it.
And she did some Zoom calls where she was cooking gnocchi with her aunt in Italy, and so it was really challenging to pull it off. So a lot of times you get nominated for awards for work that in my opinion isn't my best work, but in this case I think that one really deserved the nomination.
Do you have an Emmy standing nearby out of the frame?
Now, I did have one from years ago, and my kids knocked it off the shelf and it broke off the stand. So I was trying to figure out a way to turn it into a hood ornament for my car. Wouldn't that
I would
be?
love that. Or a necklace, I think,
Yeah,
in the
just some real
meantime.
good bling going around. So
Okay. So you don't have them nearby that we could
I
see?
don't have them nearby. The other interesting award I won an MTV award
Cool.
for a music video I directed back in 1987
Wow.
when MTV used to show music videos.
What was it?
It was for a band called Jim Ball and the Suits. I'll send you
Okay.
a link to it.
Yeah.
I actually just showed it to my students in class yesterday, and they were amazed. It's a very 80s. I shot it on 16 millimeter film. I edited it, and yeah, we put it up. We won the award there was a basement tapes competition. We won the award for best unsigned band. Um, and it got pretty good airplay on MTV for 3 or 4 months. So, but it was an interesting time. Mhm.
Um, so I want to hear about your origin story. Where did you grow up? You can just give us the rundown. What did you want to be when you grew up? Where did you go to school if you went to school after high school? Just give us the elevator speech of Greg.
So okay, this is gonna be tough, but I grew up. My father was an Air Force pilot, so I was a military brat. Moved around a lot. He ended up retiring in Colorado Springs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I pretty much lived from third grade on. Um, Graduated from high school in Colorado Springs. I knew when I was a freshman in high school, I made a short 8 millimeter film that we entered into a statewide contest, and we were up against college students and graduate students, and these two little eighth graders basically went up and got, or I guess we were in ninth grade, but we won the award, and from that moment on, I caught the bug. It was this silly little film. When we had a soundtrack, we actually synced it up with one of my partners was a musician, and we had live music playing for it, and so we kind of overkilled it, and from then on, I had the bug. I knew I wanted to make films. Um, I went to undergraduate at the University of Notre Dame. Um, in South Bend, beautiful South Bend, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they really did, I knew I wanted to study film. They had a fledgling film department. In fact, when I graduated, um, I won't say what year, but there were only six of us in the program.
Wow.
And then it was wonderful. I got to, work on film. I got to, get my hands dirty and wrote screenplays and had some great professors there. Then I went on to graduate film school at the University of Texas in Austin. And this was a heady time. This was in the mid to late 80s. Um, and I was there right before Linklater, but it was the Coen brothers had just shot Blood Simple in Austin. Um, and I was one of the few grad students that had film experience. So of course I was the lead TA, and I had to teach the others how to use cameras. Well, at Notre Dame we had one Arri BL camera, and I knew that thing inside and out. And when I got to Austin, there were 24 different cameras that I now had to learn so that I could teach those to the other students. And that's always been kind of a fallback for me is teaching has been when you learn something to teach it, you learn it completely different. You have to be bulletproof. You have to know everything. Whereas if you just learn it, just show me what button to push to make it turn on, and show me how to make it work. So I've always fallen back on teaching, throughout my career. From graduate film school, I got hired by an ad agency in Baltimore. Um, and I was right out of film school. I was writing, directing, and producing Nissan commercials right after they had changed from Datsun to Nissan. I was doing commercials for them, and I would shoot a commercial once a month. I would fly from We were shooting in Salt Lake because we were saving a lot of money. So I would spend a week in Salt Lake and 3 weeks in Baltimore. I did that for about 2 years, and one of the problems, though, in the advertising world is I got pigeonholed because I went in as a car guy. I became a car guy. I could not convince anybody else that I could do anything different.
Hmm.
So I was a car guy for years and years, and I ended up. I really wanted to get back west. I loved living in Baltimore, but it was not home, and I was a Westerner at heart. So I got on, J. Walter Thompson hired me to do Ford commercials in Denver. So I said I begrudgingly, I had to stay in the car business, but it got me to Denver. And so I was working for Ford for about 2.5 years with J. Walter Thompson. Um, and when I left the advertising industry, my first client was John Elway, owned car dealerships, and so I did all of John Elway's TV commercials
Oh,
when
cool.
he was actually still playing at the time. So
Uh-huh.
did some really fun work with him, and there's one in particular where he was playing hockey with Mike Ricci from the Avalanche. And he was, this is while he was still playing. And so all the news stations are covering, we're shooting on the ice at it was McNichols at the time, but we were shooting on the ice and he kept falling down and they kept saying, oh my God, why would he risk his career? And, if he'd have hurt himself, I probably would have been lynched or had to leave Denver. Because that was before he won the Super Bowl. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so then I started my own film production company. This is when I started directing music videos. I would direct a lot of advertisements. I was the director of photography on a feature film that wasn't very good, but it was done. And then I really learned Avid came out about that time, and I became one of the first Avid editors in the state of Colorado.
I learned about Avid
Yeah,
from
from
Chuck
Chuck. Yeah,
O'Brien.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
it's interesting, yeah, because he was selling it, and I ended up, we didn't meet each other for 20 years later, but it
oh,
was,
wow. Okay.
but I'm pretty sure. So the first Avid came into town, one guy learned it, and then he taught it to me. So I'm pretty sure I'm the second Avid editor in the state, and I realized. So being one of the things when I was in graduate film school, I learned I got hired to edit a lot of people's films. I was really good at editing. It's a combination of technical savvy and artistic choices, but also a lot of patience and the
I
ability to
bet.
sit
I
in a
bet.
dark room for hours on end. Um, and so when Avid came along, I was an advertising producer, and you had to sit on the back bench and tell an editor what to do, and it was really frustrating for me. And so when Avid came around, it was like I got to sit on the front bench, I got to touch the machine, and I got to make the decisions, and I could, once I learned Avid, um, you can, once you learn the software, you can edit literally as fast as you think. Whereas when I was editing on film and you're cutting and you're splicing film together, every edit it takes, you spend an hour deciding, well, should I cut it here or here? And whereas with Avid and nonlinear, you can just, well, let me try this, let me try that, let me try this. And
And what did Avid evolve into? Like, what do people like? What was the next generation of editing software?
well, Avid started out and they really had to win over the professionals in the industry. And so advertising was the low-hanging fruit, I think, for Avid. And so cutting ads was really easy because you can import your material, you can make your decisions, and then you can back then you had to do it at low resolution, and then you had to upres it and master it. And so commercials were easy. The hard thing was convincing the film industry where they're making feature films to cut on that because the big thing to overcome, and I don't want to get too technical, but the 3-2 pull down. Video worked at 30 frames per second and film worked at 24 frames per second. So you had to come up with a way to, if you cut it on Avid on in the 30 frame world, you had to be able to export a negative cut list that was meaningful and didn't drift and you didn't lose frames and things like that. Because over the course of a feature film, you might lose sync by 10 or 15 frames, and it's actually disastrous. So I actually became an Avid certified instructor for 7 years, and at the Colorado Film School had the only Avid training program between LA and New York, really. So I was teaching pretty much everyone in the Midwest how to use this exciting new software.
What years were those?
I want to say 93 to 97, somewhere around in there. Actually, I was still teaching in 99 because when there were some people that came over from they were just building the Pepsi Center and they were working for the Avalanche and the Nuggets, and they were trying to learn this software so that they could put together their season. And I was like, doesn't the season start in a couple of weeks? They're like, yeah, we'll figure it out. And so I told them, I said, you need to hire me as an editor. So I went and interviewed for the job. And of course, the sports world was notoriously low paying, and what they wanted to pay an editor uh, was less than I was willing to take. But I also heard that they needed a director as well, somebody to direct the live events every game night. So I said, I'll tell you what, if you combine those two jobs and combine those two salaries, I'll be your editor director. And so I did that for 3 seasons. And in fact, when the Avalanche won a Stanley Cup in 2001, I got a Stanley Cup ring out of it. So,
Oh, cool. Do you
but
have it nearby? Can we
I
look?
do not have it nearby.
Where's all these artifacts,
It's
Greg?
in a safe
Are they in
place.
a safe?
I'm not big on collecting things. In fact,
Those are kind of big things to collect, Emmys
I know.
and
One of the
things.
most recent was we won an Emmy Award for editing for the Winter Olympics in Beijing. And it was one of those where here you won is like, if you want the statue, you have to send $750. And it's like,
No.
do I want that? I mean, is that the price
Yes. Did you get
for
it?
I did not get it.
Oh.
Just I'm not well, one of the things I even, I tell my students it's always, it's not about winning the awards. It's like I know the stuff that some of the best projects or the best editing that I did was on projects that will never see the light of day, but it was like I had to take a steaming pile of lousy footage and somehow turn it into something usable. That to me is when an editor, that's the best job of editing. Most of the time when somebody wins an award for editing, you've got, amazing actors, you've got amazing cinematographers, and it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like a cakewalk, I think,
Mm-hmm.
um, to an award. Um, there are films that require the sort of you know that balance between technical and aesthetic that comes in. You have to learn the craft, and you also have to learn how to tell the story and how to do it well.
Greg, I have so many questions for you. Mainly, I like how choosy are you about the jobs you take? Like, are you like proactive about seeking work or finding people to work with? I don't know how it works as an editor. Or do you just wait to be hired? And if you like it, you say yes. Like, how does that process work?
It is a tough process. I mean, one of the things for me, especially when you first start your career, you will edit anything, we'll cut for food. You wear a sandwich board and somebody says, "Hey, will you cut this?" And you're like, "Ooh, that seems kind of sketchy," but yes, I will cut that. And um, eventually, I think where when I found I could call myself a successful editor is when I could turn down projects and say, "No, I could do that, I could kill that, but I wouldn't be happy, and it would make me miserable." So I have turned down projects, and I've just said, you know what, you might find somebody that's a better fit for this. Um, and you also, one of the things when you're choosing a job as an editor is you're also entering into a relationship, usually with a director or a producer. And, sometimes, I put more stock into those, the first time I meet a director or producer and I say, do I want to be in a dark room with this person for 2 to 6 months, or, can I
I think
stand?
that's a question we can all ask ourselves when getting into a new relationship or
Yes,
friendship. Like, do I want to be in a dark alley or
yeah.
room? It's
It
personal.
really is. It is like dating. I mean, you have to say, gosh, am I, it's going to be exciting at first and we're going to do some really fun things, but then, gosh, how do I, am I going to feel good about myself at the end of the day? Will I feel like you know, is this, and the other thing is you want to make sure that there is a match because if you don't get along, then the project will suffer because of it.
Hmm.
So you have to make sure. One of the things a lot of people when they're asking, say, hey, will you send me your reel? I really struggle with what is my reel because I have done everything from, 30-second TV commercials to, I worked for 7 years doing reality television. So I have a lot of, you know,
What?
Home and Garden and Food Network and Animal Planet. And I actually was the showrunner for a series on Travel Channel and Discovery. And so it was, um, so I have all of this myriad of stuff, and I've done features. I did a martial arts movie. I did a Christmas movie. I've done all of these things. And so when you say, well, what is your editing style? The true choice of a really good editor says, I will match whatever the footage is or whatever the story is. And I'm not going to cut the martial arts movie the same way that I cut the Christmas movie.
Right. Do you
And
have
if
several reels then?
Well, it usually is. I get most of my work by word of mouth. It's things that I've
Okay.
done. Hey, I saw this. I tracked down who the editor was, and I want you to cut this project. Most people, it's really. I mentioned before when I was in advertising how people get pigeonholed. It's kind of the same way in film and television, television especially. Um, I was trying to really, right after we left New Mexico, I went to the Winter Olympics, and then we kind of floated around for a bit. And Tammy and I we actually moved to LA for a while, and we were trying to break into the industry out there, and um, I kept getting people to say, "Well, have you done true crime before?" I was like, "No, but I would love to." It's like, "Well, if you haven't done it before, then we cannot hire
But
you
how are
to do
you supposed to
crime."
do it if
Yeah,
you,
and it's
yeah.
like I could bring a fresh look and a fresh voice to true crime, but I bet you, I would be great at that. And they're like, yeah, but we're looking for someone with experience. Well, then you're going to get what everyone else has done, and
Hmm.
that, unfortunately, is what I call the myopic nature of television. Is they really do not. Nobody wants to take a chance. Um, I did. I worked on one show. Pretty much the only thing I got out of LA was I got to work on a show. It was for AMC's Shudder channel, which is their horror network. But they were doing a series called Queer for Fear, and it was about looking a history of horror films through the lens of the LGBTQ plus. So it was really a cool dynamic, and they were interviewing, you know, basically drag queens and transvestites, and so they had experts, and it was really an anthology show. And the first thing I cut was I did a whole thing on Rocky Horror Picture Show, and it was a blast and it was really fun. But part of that is I kind of landed the job sight unseen. They were desperate to somebody left, and so I jumped in. I remember at the first couple Zoom meetings they were like, this guy is really old and he's probably straight and he doesn't fit. So part of I don't even want to say that I got profiled, but I kind of got reverse profiled. And even though I was doing great work for them, it was like, did I culturally fit what they were doing? And so I loved working on that show, but I didn't I did it for about 2 or 3 months. And that's what the nature of it is you also on an anthology series like that, they had 6 editors, and each one of us was doing an episode. And then you say, "Oh, we're going to move this to that episode," and you have to basically, each one you can't have 6 different editing styles. And so I had to say, show me what you guys are doing so that I can match what your pace is and what your tone is and what your editing style is. And that becomes really, really problematic is when you have a bunch of editors, it becomes kind of like putting together Frankenstein's monsters and everything doesn't fit nicely together. And you can see the zippers and you can see the seams. It's like, oh, this was cut by a different person. The Food Network show with Giada that I cut, it was like there were three of us that were cutting different episodes, but we had a really strong producer who said, this is what we're going for. And here, you do your rough cut, and then I will give you notes. And they say, oh, let's get rid of this, let's get rid of that.
Mhm.
Because generally when in a cooking show, when they're generally they cook three dishes over the course of a half an hour, and your rough cut ends up being about 47 minutes. And you're just like, what do I cut out? It's like, well, we don't need to see the bread dough rise. So there's 10 minutes out there, and so now you start jettisoning things, or you say, well, I can do a cool speed ramp to get us through this mixing, and um, we can put it in the oven and we can watch the cookies rise or something like that. So it's
Right,
coming up with ways to move the story along. And one of the cool things for me has always been I go through stages where I'll like teach for about 3 or 4 semesters, and then I'll take 3 or 4 semesters off, and then I'll go back and teach. And what it does is that keeps me fresh, and you know, I I have to learn what's going on right now. I have to
right.
be current with trends and things like that. So I don't want to get pigeonholed as, oh, and in fact, when I started sending out my resume, I started lopping off decades of my resume so that people wouldn't think, oh, he's an old guy. He can't do anything young and hip. And I was like, well, I won a music video award back in back
Yeah,
in the
that's
day,
cool.
and I've done
Hmm.
some really cool things over my career, and I've done some things that are kind of perfunctory. So you mentioned the Pickleball Network very lately. So last year, the Tennis Channel launched a pickleball network, and I'm essentially the lead editor for that, and I work remotely from Colorado. I log on to an Avid in Santa Monica and do my editing, and so I get the luxury of working in California, but I'm living in where I want to live in Denver. So
Do you play pickleball?
I don't. I
Do you
played one
know?
Actually, I played one game and I
Uh-huh.
won, so I'm going to retire with an undefeated record. So
Do you know, so you know the rules and everything?
yeah,
Yeah,
and
obviously.
and I just pitched. It's a startup network, and at first they were just covering the pro pickleball tournaments that were happening just about every weekend. So it was really a sports driven, event driven network, and now they've decided, okay, this is going to stick. So now we're having to, um, as a network, they're trying to figure out, okay, we got to come up with some original programming. And so I actually pitched them an idea, and we were developing a series um, about when I was at Series Fest, I met somebody who talked about how in New York City, pickleball has become the latest dating craze, and it's
Mhm.
replacing like the singles bar and the online dating and
Love
things like
it.
that. You
Okay.
you basically go to a pickleball court and it's like speed dating with a paddle.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Good
we're
stuff.
actually going to do a series about speed
Great.
date
That's
pickleball in New
awesome.
York City.
I
So
will happily be a subject on that. I've recently taken up pickleball and I could use some speed pickleball dating.
yes, there you go.
Yes. Is it going to be filmed in New York?
Yes, we're
Oh,
gonna
great.
shoot it
Okay.
and they actually just did a tournament in Central Park in New York City last weekend. So
Cool.
New York has embraced it, and
Yeah.
it's become part of the culture. I mean, it's just going crazy everywhere, and
It's pretty
I,
awesome. I love it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of tennis players who are still anti-pickleball
I
and
know.
fighting it with every
Yeah, they're two different things to some people,
yeah.
but it's really fun. It's easy enough. It's just hard enough, and you could still be social. So I could see it's a good like socializing platform.
Yeah.
Well, if you need anyone in New York, I volunteer. to play pickleball on your
Oh, that's
show.
right. You
And
spend a lot
my
of
friend
time there.
Anna will learn how to play pickleball before you get there, and we'll be
Okay.
on the show. We want to hear about a few more things, even though I think we could do a whole nother show with you. Um, First of all, what kind of equipment do you use? What do you recommend for the kids out there?
Well, I've been editing on Avid for a long time, but I will tell you that I teach Adobe Premiere. And the main reason is it's much more accessible and a lot of professionals are using Premiere now. So Avid is still a little more cost prohibitive. Um, and the other great thing about Adobe Premiere is you can dynamic link between After Effects and Audition, and you can get all of that in the wonderful Adobe Cloud. And I think you can buy a subscription for 25 bucks a month. I don't want to get be held to that, but I think that's because I'm an instructor. But anyway,
Yeah,
there's
I think they have specials for students and
yeah.
instructors for sure.
It's really a wonderful program. And again, it doesn't, I don't want to say this too loudly, but it doesn't really matter what tool you use. It really is, you have to learn the craft of editing. And that's where, um, when I taught the Avid certified classes, people would come in for around the country and I'd have 10 days to teach them all about the software. And then I'd give them a little certificate at the end and they'd go off and I would get phone calls saying, "Hey, you signed this guy's diploma and he is a horrible editor." And I said, "I taught him how to use the tool. I couldn't in 10 days teach him how to tell a story and how to
Right.
edit."
Now, are
Uh,
you always telling a story or are you just, if you have a director, you're following their direction, right?
right,
But if you don't have a director, like I know in some cases, like people film documentary footage and then you make a story. It's the editor becomes the storyteller, or the
right.
director almost. How much of each of that type of work do you do?
Well, it is. I mean, every decision that gets made that of what you put on the screen, um, ultimately falls down to the editor. There's a common adage that a script is written um, really three times. Once by the script writer and then and their typewriter. The next is in pre-production and on the set, and you say, well, this isn't working or this isn't working, so we're going to redo this and we're going to, so it gets rewritten there. And then in the edit suite, so the editor and the director suddenly say that entire scene doesn't work. It's not in the picture. That's the hardest thing to do, and there are a lot of times I've worked with directors who will not let go of
Baby. You have to kill your baby.
"kill your babies" is yeah is the phrase, but it's like
Yeah.
I was like, this, let's cut this scene out. It really has no bearing on the story. It's a rally killer. It's
Mhm.
changing momentum. And he says, yeah, well, I had to pay, $20,000 to rent that house, and that's my cousin in there, and that's his little girl, and I promised them they would be in the movie. And I was like,
A little bit of sunk cost fallacy going on in there too.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like, as the editor, I don't give a damn. I really, I'm trying to tell a story. So that's when there are a lot of times directors and editors are at loggerheads, and but at the end of the day, we really need to not care about anything except the story and what shows up on screen.
Hmm.
I don't care what lunches were like, and I don't care how hard it was to get this location or how
Right,
many hours you waited to get that shot. If it doesn't work, it doesn't make the picture. And
right.
that's really hard for a lot of
They're
um
more attached to it.
yeah.
Yeah, you're seeing it more objectively. Um, I want to make sure we cover a couple things that you've worked on recently. Um, One, let's go back to New Mexico. I know fairly recently, you worked on an AMC series, or tell us about that.
So it was a series called Monogamy, and it aired on AMC's All Black channel. And it was basically a drama. It was a 6 episode series that was shot in New Mexico, kind of at the tail end of COVID. Most of the crew were still wearing masks, and we were still, walking the line. And well, and at that time, if you remember, there was a dearth of new material hitting the streamers, and so there
Right.
was a rush to be quick to screen.
Yes.
And this series we shot in New Mexico. They had a 20-day shoot schedule, and I was doing what I like to call, and what I was pitching to New Mexico for the 2 years that I lived down there, was concurrent post, where they started shooting on day one, I started editing on day two, and so I was always um, cutting things that they had shot the previous day. And I was so the typical scenario when a director at the end of a shooting day, they will go and they will look at the dailies. They'll look at the basically everything they shot yesterday.
Mhm.
Well, what I was giving them is, instead of just the raw footage, I was giving them actual fine cuts of the scenes that they had shot the day before. So they were able to, to make decisions on this, like, and you're only a day away from that set. Sometimes you're still on that set. You say, "Oh, we missed this. The actor completely missed this, so we can do some reshoots." We ended up not really having to do many reshoots, but we had that ability to fix things as we go. The other cool thing that happened was, so they had a 20-day shoot. We were doing 6 episodes. By day 25 of the program, we were at picture lock on the first 2 episodes. So we could then turn those over to the colorist and the composer, and really start the production process. Where normally the scenarios, when you're shooting 20 days, you shoot 20 days, and then you take a month off, and then you go into post, and then you spend 3 months in post. And so we were kind of accelerating the post-production schedule. But also, one of the things that I bring as an experienced editor is I'm really fast, and I make decisions. And for the most part, I would then, so the director could then watch what he did yesterday as a finished cut with music and sound effects, and he'd
Mhm.
be like, "Oh my God, that works," or, "Hey, can you try a different take of this line? This one bothers me," and I could respond to notes very quickly. Um,
This sounds really useful or
it really is. And that's mostly for like modest budget. I mean, the big budget, the features, the $1 million, multi-million-dollar features, they really don't need speed, and they don't need that kind of economy of that sort of turnaround. The other thing is, the great thing about New Mexico is they were getting for post-production, I believe it's a 35% um, tax incentive, or a rebate, um, a cash rebate that they're getting. So, but in the grand scheme of most productions, you want to get that, a 30% rebate on production of costs of maybe $1 million. That's a large amount. When you get into post-production, you're usually only dealing with one or two people, and so that the percentage savings is just just smaller in proportion.
right.
Uh, so that's what, one of the things I struggled with is, I was trying to when we moved to New Mexico, the goal was to really, everyone kept telling us, was we were thinking of moving down there, "We don't do post here. We don't do post in New Mexico." And I was like, "That's because I'm not there."
Yeah.
So there's a bit of hubris and arrogance that said, "I'm going to change that." And unfortunately, the disease kind of took our wind out of our sails. We tried to wait it out, and then it just took too long to come back in. So we had to move on. I still love New Mexico. I would love to go back there, and would love to work on projects. And especially, if somebody really is excited about that concurrent post model, I think I love doing that. I love cutting fast and making decisions, and being a part of the team, when even though I'm really not on set, I'm either nearby or set adjacent, so that I
Right.
can be part of the team telling the story. And I can
Well,
even
it
say,
sounds
"Okay,
valuable.
yeah." So,
We have time for one more story. I hate to rush because there's so many. I was going to ask if you ever been in front of the camera. Have you ever acted? Like, Do you have maybe one little story? We might have to interview you again at some point.
Well, the only real my first film job, the first job I had in film was I was in graduate school in Austin, and I found out that Willie Nelson was shooting a Western. And so I basically called the set designer and I said, "Hey, let me come help." And so I was part of the construction crew. I worked, building this Western town. We built an entire Western town on Willie's ranch in uh,
Cool.
Buck, Texas, I believe, and
Love Willie.
Pedernales. But anyway, and then when they started filming, I was part of my official title in the film is assistant prop master. So I was in charge of, I was basically involved in every scene. And one of the things that happened is they were doing the fight scene at the end, and Willie, he was shooting. It was indoors, and there was guns being fired inside, and he says, "Hey, I want to wear earplugs because I'm a musician. I need to protect my ears." And they said, "Well, yeah, but we see your ear in the shot, so we can't let you wear earplugs." So I became Willie's stunt double stand-in for the fight scene in Red-Headed Stranger.
Wow.
Because
Okay.
I was basically the same size as Willie. We're not, that's really all it went in. So I put on his big wig and a big furry coat and his hat, and that's me in the fight scene at the end of
And
That Headed Stranger.
and no earplugs.
So that was my first claim to fame. I do not have any aspirations to be in front of the camera. I love being behind the camera. I love writing scripts and editing and producing and directing.
Well, thank you for being in front of our camera. Thanks for joining us, Greg. This has been Film Talk Weekly. I'm your guest host, Castle Cersei, with the Santa Fe International Film Festival. Been learning about Gregg Stouffer, producer, editor, professor. If you want to reach Greg, how can we reach you?
You can reach me at stofferprod at Gmail.
And that's STOUFFERPROD at gmail.com. Like
Right.
Stouffer's Pizzas,
Yes.
but it's pronounced Stauffer.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like
Okay.
the frozen lasagna, only a little different.
Yeah. Very different. Very different. Thanks for joining us, Greg. We'll see you soon. We'll see you all at the Santa Fe International Film Festival, October 10th, 16th through the 20th. Okay. Bye, Greg.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.